Hi everyone, welcome to Alpha Art Gallery's artist interview series. My name is Jeannie No, and today I am joined by artist Arik Gorban, whose works are currently on view at Alpha Art Gallery's 2024 Winter Photography Exhibition. Gorban is a photographer and photography instructor who also works extensively as a judge for photo contests and juried exhibits within the New Jersey area. This is Gorban's fourth time featuring his works at the New Brunswick Art Salon, and we are very lucky to have him again this year. Thank you for joining me today, Arik. And before we get to talking about your art, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I love the cold weather, so I spend a lot of time outside and just came back from the park.
That's perfect. It goes with your background too.
Yeah, same park, Duke Island Park, not far from my house.
Awesome. So then next question. Could you tell us a little about the works you submitted for this year's exhibition? Was there a central theme, idea, or some other artistic practice you wanted to explore through them?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to do, and I speak quite frequently, present to camera clubs, is really trying to show people that to make art, you don't have to travel to exotic places, to national parks. You can do a lot of it around your house, around your home, local small parks. This is behind me, Duke Island Park is a local county park. And really, it's about you being creative, doing something different. So what you've seen in the pictures that I submitted this time, they all have something unique about them, even though there are more of the mundane places around us. Either it's the process, it's the infrared camera, it's shifting the camera during the exposure. So all using techniques to do something that is mine rather than just record what's out there.
Thank you. That's awesome. I always love to know more about like the inspiration and I guess like the big thought behind like a lot of the subjects that photographers take. As you mentioned, a lot of your works that you submitted this time were like about nature and also with the bike races. And so I love to know kind of your inspiration behind them.
Yeah, so what I submitted is all the pictures are, well, not all nature. There were the bike races, there were some others, but they were all more generic type images. They were not, you saw in my bio somewhere that I like to do street photography. That's actually something I love to do. And it's not just about the photography. I go on these long road trips, often with, actually always with my dog, and we go pretty far. We travel for weeks in the car, and I love to do this type of photography. It's not necessarily the type of photography that you put in a gallery for this type of an exhibit. So I didn't submit any of those. But I had a different exhibit where it was more about storytelling, more about the conditions in the southern part of the Midwest. And I've done a lot of street photography there and talked to people. Most of my street portraits are not candid, or after I engage in a conversation with the subjects, with the people. But this is not the type of exhibit that you're doing now, so I did not submit any of those, but I did have an exhibit on that.
Thank you for telling me about that. And then, are you someone who carefully plans out a shot, or do you prefer to work more spontaneously?
I do both things. So I like to travel and then I react to things that I see. But my preferred approach is to work in projects. So it doesn't necessarily mean that I prepare every shot. Of course, if I do still life of flowers at home, stuff like that, of course, I prepare, I set it up, set up the lighting. When I photograph, I do some people photography. And then, yes, I set up lighting and I work with them, even discuss clothing. And so more prepared. But working in project, what it means, I go out, I have some topic in mind, and it's not necessarily subjects in mind, but more thinking of, okay, I did a whole project on empty street at night, went to 30 towns around within an hour drive of my home and photographed from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. It was planned in great details. I wrote a project plan. I defined exactly how I'm going to process the images. All the pictures were taken with the same camera, same lens, same f-stop. I really wanted things to be consistent. All the processing included presets that I set up for both color and black and white presentations. So in a book, they appear consistent, there's a flow, there's a story. So I work both days, but even when I go out for something local here, usually I have pretty clear idea of what it is that I'm going to photograph. Even when I go to shoots in the snow, I knew exactly what I'm going to do, went out with a single camera, single lens, and was very focused on what I wanted to photograph.
Oh, okay. So then, because you do work with like so many different subject matter techniques and different genres of photography. I'm still curious to know, though, if there is a certain genre of photo that you like best or feel that you tend to gravitate towards?
As I said, I like street photography. And of course, during COVID, I've done less travel. I did more local. I still did some. So I did go to local places. The empty street at night was during the peak of COVID. I drove, within a day drive of my house. So I didn't stay in hotels, but I drove around and did some of that. But I like to work with trees. I like to work with abstracts. So I do a mixture of things, but I would say street photography I enjoy the most. Also, because I have the dog and we go out to the parks every day, I do a lot of small landscape, those micro landscapes, like the picture you see behind me, but also sometimes just reflections in a puddle, some cracks in the pavement, some ripples in the pond or a river. So, but I'm not
That's
focused on
awesome.
one single thing.
Yeah, that's great to know. I'm so happy I got to meet your dog too when you were visiting the gallery, so I can kind of picture it.
She was already in 27 states. So when I say I like to travel with the dog twice to South Carolina, all the way to Arkansas, a big loop, to the Dakotas. Then we did all the way across the country to Washington State. Last September, we went to Ohio, to the Amish country in Ohio. For street photography, she's a great companion because you don't look so creepy when you approach people when you have a small dog with you.
That's awesome. Yeah,
It's
she
just-
is your companion.
And you saw she likes people. She's very friendly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh, then for the next question, I am aware that you got into photography at a very young age and have been doing it for many years. Do you remember how you first got into photo or maybe your first camera?
Yeah, so my first camera was a Kodak Instamatic, and then shortly after that, my father got Nicormat. It was an SLR and a single lens reflex, and I used it more than he did. And at that time, when I was about 10 years old, my neighbor had a dark room, another friend had the dark room, so I asked for it, and I started doing my own processing. So at a very young age, I would go with the school or the scouts on trips. I would take a lot of pictures and then sell the prints to my friends for very little, but it was enough to cover my expenses so I could keep going with the hobby. But I never dropped it. I've been doing it since then.
Oh,
My
that's
mother
really
was into art. My mother was painting, so we went to museums, to galleries quite frequently.
Yeah, that's really good to know. Yeah. Now, this is not the first time you've exhibited at Alpha Art Gallery. Could you tell us how your most recent body of works compare or are similar to the photos from the previous exhibitions you were in?
I'm not trying to keep any specific type of pictures. So I think that in a way they're similar in terms of the type of scenes, in terms of the processing. I think there are times where I do more black and white, more moody, more dramatic images. I think this time I put something, all the pictures I put now, you do have some black and white, you have some infrared, you have some that I use by shifting the camera during the exposure to create that blur, that story. I like the energy in those. But, when I put something into the exhibit, the only thing I make sure is that I'm not showing the same stuff that I had previously. But there is no real progression or agenda going from one exhibit to another.
No, that's all right. I was just curious because I did notice that for this exhibit, a lot of it was based on like nature and landscape alongside with like the bike racing and stuff. So I guess I wanted to confirm like before we move on to like see if maybe you wanted to talk at all about like your previous exhibitions.
No, it's to be honest, I don't even remember because I had exhibits in different places and I present to camera clubs. In the last few weeks, I had almost every night something. So I do share my work very frequently, not always in print, most often in presentations in programs, but there was nothing necessarily intentional moving from one year to another with the Alpha Gallery. I put pictures that are relatively recent because I'm more connected with my more recent work. I wanted to have some, as I said, all the pictures that I put now had something unique about them. They were not just straight shots. because I'm trying to move more and more from recording what's out there to creating pictures about subject, not pictures of subjects. So it's when I look at a flower, everybody knows how a flower or how a tree looks like. It's not about, hey, here's a pretty flower or a pretty tree. It's what I do with it. It's the shapes. It's the spread of the trunks. It's the clouds behind it. So one of the pictures I have there is a tree against storm clouds. So again, it's about finding stuff that has some mood, tells story. And when I talk about telling stories, it could be an abstract. It's not, I don't do photojournalism or documentary work. It's making you think, making you feel. What you feel and think, it doesn't have to be the same as my thoughts and feelings when I took the picture. I just need to create pictures that engage you. You use your own experience, your own background, your own past stories to think, oh, that's what this tells me about. This is what it reminds me of. So it just create pictures that engage, but how you interpret it is your thing, not mine.
Okay, thank you so much for telling me that. My next question kind of goes along with what you were just discussing. I wanted to know more about your creative process, specifically about one of them. From your works for this exhibition, there is a mix of super sharp, clear, and almost hyper-realistic works, but also photos with a lot of movement and blurring, like the bike race one and bike race two. So I'd love to know more about specifically like the creative process behind the bike race photos.
Yeah, so the bike race is here every year in Somerville. It's actually a major bike race. To be honest, I don't care who wins. I don't even know who the participants are. But I love the movement, I love the action, I love the crowd. Sometimes I take more pictures of the people on the sidewalk watching the race than participating in the race. Now, I've done it many years. And yes, you don't want to keep doing the same thing. So I thought in the last 2 years, okay, what can I do differently than what I've done before? Now, a technique that is not new, now people call it ICM, intentional camera movement. It's a new name, but for an old technique. I've used it when I shot film many years ago. And what you do, you shoot with a little bit slower shutter speeds, and you move the camera either sideways or up and down to create that motion blur and create more of an abstract presentation. So again, it's not an original technique. I didn't invent it. It's something that I like to use. What I try to do to make it a little different is I often take two pictures, one when I move the camera and one straight, and then I blend them in Photoshop, which is not what I've done with the bikes. With the bikes, to make it a little different, I used my infrared camera. So you have different tones. If you look at the prints, they have some unique tones to them because they're done with the infrared camera. The infrared camera handles better midday shooting because most of these bike races happen during the day, midday. They start around 11 a.m. So the infrared really brings out shadow details, so it made for nicer images. But the same technique was used on the one down the shore. When you have the waves, I put a couple of pictures with that. And moving the camera, I was only a foot over the water. And when the waves came, I moved the camera with the wave and got those pictures. So again, it's a technique that I feel doing some more creative, not just taking pictures, but really creating some work.
I see. I really liked what you mentioned though about how you're really fascinated by the bike races and keep coming back to it because of like the movement and those like more artistic aspects of it. Because I feel like that's such an artist thing where like you just observe things around the world that like you keep coming back to, whether it's like the composition, the colors, or like the movement, and then you just return to it. Like you have a fascination with it.
Yeah, I go and in my workshops, I tell people, go back to the same places because the more you know about the place, you know what to anticipate, you know what works, you know what doesn't work, and just give it time. Stay there and wait for things to happen, and it will. If you don't go, you're not going to get it. I do it with street photography. I go to exactly the same spots because I know what to look for. I know how the light is going to be. The more you know about the place, the more you know about the activity, the more you are prepared to create your work.
There is also another work I'm curious to know more about, Round Valley. It depicts this beautiful pinkish white tree in like a field of equally pale color under a grayish blue sky. When I first saw it, it looked almost fantastical and very atmospheric. And I'd just like to know more about this photo and like where this is and if there's a story behind it.
So Round Valley is another park that I go quite frequently with the dog. It's nice. She runs there. She loves the place. And I always take a camera with me. And this on this day, it was the infrared camera. And for a while, we were walking around the place and there was nothing unique. I mean, I took pictures, and then the storm approached and I saw the storm clouds behind the tree. The tree is right by the parking lot there. And I waited until it was really very dramatic and I took pictures with the infrared camera. So when I take pictures with the infrared camera, the colors are actually not realistic colors. I have to manipulate it in Photoshop to get the colors that I want. So and that's what you see. But what the infrared does, it really enhances the clouds and increases the impact, the dramatic impact of the clouds. So that's why, and again, the tones, the colors, all that are very much controlled. They come out of the camera. I had to manipulate them a little bit, but I think I had more infrared pictures in the exhibit. The bikes are the same and they would have the same colors, but sometimes I present it in black and white, sometimes with a bit of color.
Okay, I love that. Like you
Yeah,
saw an
and by the way,
opportunity.
as soon as we got to the car, it started pouring. So
Oh, it was like perfect timing then.
yeah.
Awesome. And then are there any artists or interests outside of photo that you feel has inspired your creative process?
Yes, well, of course, as I say, I love to travel. I love to walk with the dogs. I like to go to small towns. So a lot of my photography was in small towns around the country. But I think what sometimes photographers, especially people in photography clubs, camera clubs, they look at the same type of photography and really don't expose themselves to beyond that. And I think to become a good artist, whether you're a photographer or painter, you need to look at more than one type of art. I do like to look at paintings, at art exhibits, at sculptures. So I do like to look at exhibits, not just photography. You know, sometimes you can watch a ballet and see the movements and see how the fabrics move and say, next time I photograph birds, I want to get that movement. I want to get that soft, sometimes blurry movement. So if you want to be creative, you can lock yourself into very narrow field of art. You should really expose yourself to beyond that. But this is my hobby, this and walking with the dog, traveling, this is what I do. Tried to play music long time ago. I wasn't good.
No, but I love that open-mindedness though. I definitely noticed that not even just with your work, but with a lot of the photos during the exhibit, kind of like the different inspiration that photographers have, whether it be in music or in painting in their photos. And like that's always like amazing to see how like everything is sort of inspiring each other and being connected.
Yep.
We're at the last question. Could you tell us a little about what's next? Are there any works, shows, or personal projects that you would like to show or share with the audience?
I don't have anything specific right now, but as I said, I do work in projects. So a project that I started, I did submit a couple of pictures where those icicles on top of rocks, and it's really not to show the ice so much. It was really, again, it's not pictures of something, but about something. You have those ice crystals that are bright, and then you have almost black water around them. Very tiny cascades that I took in local parks, in Hucklebarney, in Ken Lockwood Gorge, and really working with the tones to create that impact. So you have those shiny icicles, and then you have some parts of the stream that are white and then everything else very dark, the water that is not foaming or in direct light. So this is for me fun to do, although you go on the very cold days and you go down in the snow. But unfortunately, last year I had only 2 days that I could do it in terms of the temperatures outside and icicles. And this year we had a few cold days, but look where we are today. We had 60 some yesterday, today a little cooler. So hopefully we'll get a few more days. But this is a project that I started. I put into a little book, but I need to do more. Of course, there's always a plan for another road trip and do some more photography in the Midwest I want to do again. This is mainly what I like to do.
Yeah, I hope we get more icicles soon. Then it gets colder again, so I can see those photos. Yeah, thank you for telling me about all those works. I'm very excited for like whatever future projects or shows you plan to do in the future alongside the icicles. That's like all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining me in this
You're very
interview.
welcome.
Yeah, I wish you all the best, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thank you.